What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Blerd Out. So as you know, One Piece is on break this week. We'll be seeing it next week. It comes back in the 23rd. So we should be seeing the chapter next week, hopefully. And that'll be the last chapter of the year. And if you don't already know, on the main channel, we'll be doing a few top videos, like top 10s, waifus, top color spreads, top arcs, bunch of top stuff, ultimately culminating in the top 30, which we do every year. Don't forget to check that out. Since we have no chapter, we're going to talk a little bit today about the discourse of last chapter and kind of just One Piece as a whole. Of course, this does contain spoilers for the latest chapter and everything for it, so if you have not fully caught up, please note there will be spoilers ahead.
Spoilers.
Okay, so last chapter we got the absolutely touching reunion of Robin and Saul. Tears were shed, manly men cried. It was a wonderful time. But there's been a bit of discourse about why Saul is still alive. And to one point, I agree. I think that Saul being alive wasn't necessarily written in the story, but there wasn't out where it could be written. Where Saul's death was very uncertain. And in One Piece, when death is uncertain, you can almost lean on the fact that it's probably not a given. Some say if you don't see the body, then you can't count the death. But I mean, even with that, in Wano, we saw Ashura Doji, but we still didn't believe he was dead until we got the actual text and the gravesite saying that he was dead. You know, the Will of P exists, where Pedro and Pound we know is still alive. Pedro we haven't seen yet, so there are no conclusions on that. But death is kind of a touchy topic in One Piece. Now, for me, especially with the Saul situation, I think that, to be honest, Saul was fine. I don't see a huge problem with Saul. And the reason I'll say that is because I don't think it detracts from Robin's story. Whereas Robin didn't know Saul was alive. And I understand that it's reading from our perspective, and that's kind of how we're supposed to look at it. I'm saying that as far as taking away from the story, it doesn't take away from Robin's story, because she still went through all that stuff. Saul being alive doesn't change anything that happened before we knew Saul was alive. She still suffered the same amount, only this time she gets a moment of happiness before it's probably taken away. On the end of Saul, he wasn't a major character quite yet to begin with, so it's not like we removed a major character from the story and then brought them back. Saul's main purpose was to exist for Robin in a way, whereas that was her one friend and her major push to keep on living. That was Saul's purpose. So whether he lived or died, he served his purpose in her story. Now, I think what hits this, what really brings it all around, is the amount of times we have seen kind of fake out deaths and how it makes us feel at this point. Because I genuinely think that if we didn't have as many fake out deaths as we did, this Saul thing wouldn't be as bad. People would be more okay with it. Because people are already okay with it, they're just tired of the gimmick. Where it's like, we spent a lot of time in post-time skip getting fake out deaths. I think Pell was the start of it, but Pell, that's always been kind of a hands-off case. The reasons behind Pell are still kind of up and down. And Pell isn't even as far as a side character, he wasn't as major as some of these other characters are, so Pell's fine. But post time skip, we started seeing it a lot where people would end up dead but not really be dead. Whether you want to point to Pound, whether you want to I think we spent a lot of time in the whole cake doing these fake outs, the fake tension, the fake reality of things where it's like that character should be dead, but they're not. And the more we get it, the more it kind of dampens the enjoyment. Kinemon is another one where and I think another thing there is that it was done very well, where if Kinemon had died there, that would have been very well done. But he didn't. he just got split in half. Which it's almost like you're taking this really dramatic, really emotional scene, and you're like, how can I make this funny? And that's where you lose people. And that's where you you put the sour taste in people's mouth and you ruin the ability to use this scenario for other reasons. Whereas in Saul's case, it's not being used for comedy. It's not being used as really a gimmick because Saul hasn't really done anything. It's an emotional standpoint for Robin. That's what we're using this for, which I think is fine in a creative aspect and narrative aspect. It's just that we got to this point and we're like, oh, here we go, Kinemon again. Oh, here we go, Pell again. And it's like, it's different. The situation is the same. The circumstances, the effect, the feels, all of that is different. But because we've had so many scares in the past, now it's kind of stressing us out. And you see people like Jay, you see people like Morge, even Dritz previously has made comments about how there are certain aspects that we know Oda can do well and has done well. So when we see him make choices kind of like what he did here with Saul, or what he did with Pound, what he did with Kinemon, we gotta question some things, because it's like, we know what you can do. Why are you choosing to do this? And even with the idea that Oda likes to reuse characters, Oda likes to bring people back, it's fine, but you don't have to pretend they're dead before you bring them back. You can find a more organic way to remove them from the story and then say, okay, I want to use this character, let me bring him back into the story, which he's done well. So I think that's where a lot of that discourse is coming from. Like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think there are multiple viewpoints, multiple ways you can look at it. Ultimately, I don't think this situation is a problem. I think it stems from older problems we have leading up to this. And unfortunately, this being kind of a breaking point for some people. But that kind of leads me to the main topic, which is One Piece falling off? Which is, when I first say that, it's very crazy to say, because One Piece has had some of the highest sales. I think volume 108 was the highest selling volume of the year. We have the One Piece live action. Season 1 did phenomenal. Season 2 is kicking off. People love it. One Piece was on the Vegas Sphere. I think the first anime to do that. One Piece was in the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade, second time it's been in there, and I think it's the second anime to show up after Dragon Ball Z. We have the One Piece TCG, which is doing really well. I literally can never find any of the cards because they sell out so fast, and the art is so amazing on those cards. If you haven't seen those cards, like the art, ooh, so clean. We had One Piece fan letter this year, and that's, I think, the second or third highest rated I think like anime episode on Mal. So when I say is One Piece falling off, it sounds weird because One Piece is doing really well, far better than it was doing in the past. And when I say past, I mean like 98. Because that's when I started reading One Piece, was 98, Baratie, chapter 55. The chapter where Luffy sends Don Creed's like spiked ball back with the Gum Gum Bazooka. That's the chapter I started reading One Piece in. And I've been reading it ever since. And I can tell you right now, One Piece was not popular back then. One Piece's popularity has really only skyrocketed, specifically in the West, probably within the last 10 years. I would say before that, it was entirely popular, but it wasn't the juggernaut in the West as it is now. But does all of that really culminate to it being better? That's the major question. Because with the good, you gotta look at some of the bad. And even recently, we've had health scares from Oda, where he's taking more breaks. We're seeing less chapters of the story be produced per year. Probably, I think we're like 30 this year, where we used to be at close to 50. And nothing against Oda. We obviously want him to take care of his health, but it just means that there are longer periods of the story that go kind of untouched. And if you can imagine the breaks we're taking now, imagine, say, during something like Whole Cake, where we're getting a lot of Big Mom chasing a wedding cake, or for chapters and chapters on end, but, fit 1, 2, 3 week breaks in between those chapters. The community would be livid. Even though One Piece Volume 108 was the highest selling volume, I think JJK was the highest selling manga overall, and One Piece was the second. Which, isn't necessarily bad, especially with how popularity of a new series can really kick it up. But it just goes to show that there is competition. And when you talk to especially like older One Piece fans, but a lot of One Piece fans in general, if you ask them what their top arcs are, you're gonna hear a lot of pre-time skip. You're going to hear Marineford. You're going to hear Enies Lobby in Water 7. You're going to hear Sabaody Archipelago. If you're me, I'm saying Thriller Bark. Like the top arcs for a lot of people are in the pre-time skip. When you look at post-time skip, does it really feel the same way? Because you got Fishman Island, Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Whole Cake Island, Wano, Egghead. And I think a lot of newer fans will have arcs like Wano in their top 5 just because of how high the peaks were in Wano. I think some of the older fans, some of the people who are really deep into the series, look at Wano as unfinished. I want to say unfinished because there was a lot that we wanted from Wano that we just didn't get. And it felt like the curtain was pulled on Wano before we got those things. Almost as if they were set up to happen and then just didn't for time's sake. And I referenced Jay's video earlier. Jay talks a lot about how, and if you don't know, I'm talking about JD Legend. Jay talks a lot about how Wano changed his perspective of One Piece. And I understand it. Jay is another person who's been reading One Piece for quite a minute, so I understand how the perspective change kind of hits when you get to Wano. Because even in some of my videos, back when I was doing the live reactions, I kept saying that, okay, we're going to circle back to this. We're going to circle back to this. Because usually we do. But we just didn't. Like, Wano had so much meat on the bone that was just untouched. And it's not to say that we won't circle back to it. I think some of the stuff, particularly what I was seeing with Pluton and what Kaido was really doing in Wano, I think that's tied to some deeper elements of the story that we don't have yet. So we will see them at some point, but I really wanted them in Wano. And it's not like we got teased and got a little tidbit of information and then told to wait. We got teased and then completely shut off, which really, really hurt Wano. And, outside of the fake deaths, I'll say, in Wano, that also hurt it. Kaido not really having any bodies despite being this overwhelming figure, despite being a ruthless warmonger, he really didn't kill anybody. And this isn't to say that death is the highest form of like peak fiction, but when you have an all-out war with the strongest people in the verse, you want there to be some kind of stake. Like, you want there to be stakes, you want there to be recourse, consequences. Everything shouldn't just turn out all right. And if you look at it from the Straw Hats perspective, everything turned out all right. Everything turned out better. They lost literally nothing. The Scabbards, they suffered some casualties. Honestly, they all should have been wiped. I would say all of them besides Neko and Inu probably should have been wiped out. But they're thriving. We lost Ashura and we lost Izo, which is wild to me that those two people got taken out. I think Ashura I'm okay with because it's poetic in a way, where Ashura really lost faith in Odin and the cause. And at the end of the story, he gives his life for the faith in the cause. Izo felt kind of out of place. like he was brought back in just to die. But it's things like that that makes Wano so murky. Where you look at something like Sabaody. Sabaody is such a clean arc through and through. It's fun. We're introduced to new characters, new powers, new schemes of the world. There's heartbreak, there's emotion, there's humor. It's got everything wrapped up with a nice little bow. Same with Enies Lobby and Water 7. Such good arcs that you rarely hear complaints about. I don't even know if I've heard a complaint about Water 7 and Enies Lobby. But it's like, what's going on here with these post-time skip arcs? And one of the ways I describe post-time skip is that, well, one of the ways I compare the two is that I'll say pre-time skip is the story of the Straw Hats going through this marvelous world, while post-time skip is the story of this marvelous world that the Straw Hats are taking a journey in. And what I mean by that is that pre-time skip was, I think, heavily focused on the Straw Hats and their journey. And I mean what they did specifically, how they interacted specifically with the world. While post-time skip, the Straw Hats are journeying through this world and we're seeing everything in the world happen. We're seeing the world government be more active. We're seeing revolutionaries be more active. We're seeing pirates be more active around the Straw Hats. And it's not just a contained story about them anymore. It's a story about this world. And essentially how this world is going to end up in the next few years should something happen, and a fight to control the world, basically. That's where we're at, more or less. So when you say One Piece might be falling off, when you say that One Piece seems like it's losing its luster, you could point to those reasons as reasons why. For me, I still enjoy One Piece as much as I did in the past. The story itself, where we're headed, how we're doing things, like it always fills me with joy. And that's not to say some of these things don't upset me. I still question Pound. I still question Kinemon. I still question Wano. I have those same post-time skip gripes as a lot of people. But I think if you guys watch Brago, I really like Brago's vision on how he reads One Piece, where there are certain things that obviously will catch your eye, that obviously you will question, but I don't know if I've run into something as egregious that would cause me to, lose my love for the story. Because obviously One Piece has its flaws. Every show does. There is no perfect show. There's no perfect manga. There's no perfect story. One Piece is gonna have its flaws. It's been running for like 20 something years. Like, I fully expect it to have flaws. And this isn't to say that we should dismiss those flaws because it's One Piece. I think criticism of those flaws is kind of what makes the One Piece community so great. Being able to have discourse, being able to talk about how certain things make us feel. I think that's kind of one of the magics of One Piece. So in a way, I'm thankful for that. If it was a clean cut series, if it really didn't have that kind of stuff, we really wouldn't be talking about it, would we? We'd be Demon Slayer, where it comes out, everyone likes it, and then we go out about our business. We do more important things. So I get how people might be feeling like One Piece is dipping off a little bit. I understand. Personally, I think we're still riding high. I'm still excited to see what's coming up next. I think One Piece still has so much in store for us. But let me know how you feel. Let me know what you think about One Piece in the state right now. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.